So what you're seeing here are British soldiers from the Light Company of the 4th Regiment of Foot. The British Army is divided into regiments. Regiments are the administrative unit of the British Army. Every regiment has 10 companies. A company in 1775 is approximately 36 private soldiers. As I said, there are 10 companies. 8 of those companies are referred to as battalion companies. They form the battalion of the regiment. The battalion is the combat unit of the regiment. The other 2 companies are referred to as the flank companies. They are the grenadiers, who form on the right flank of the regiment, and the light infantry, who form on the left flank of the regiment. We are portraying the light infantry. The light infantry company should be at full strength about 36 soldiers in 1775. Obviously, we have significantly fewer than that here. Companies were frequently broken down into smaller groups. These smaller groups are entirely ad hoc. They have no formal divisions, but they would be broken up and sent to various posts throughout British occupied territory. Practically, it's just hard to get 36 people in one place at one time, which is why we today in 2025 do not have the full strength. As the war progressed, as casualties began to mount, the British Army would increase the establishment size to about 56 soldiers per company. It took a while for the Army to actually increase its numbers to that level, especially the soldiers in North America. They had to do a pretty intense recruiting drive back in England. They actually ended up offering transfers to soldiers in the regiments back in England to come over and join new regiments in North America to bring those regiments up to full strength, with the thinking they're safe at home, they have time to recruit back to full strength the regiments back home. For those in North America, they brought the light companies and the grenadier companies up to full strength and allowed the battalion companies to fall under strength. The grenadiers, if you imagine British soldiers with the tall bearskin caps, that's them. They are considered the senior company of a regiment. They would be entirely composed of veteran soldiers. They were supposed to be above about 5'10", but as the revolution progressed, as the availability of veteran soldiers decreased, they relaxed those requirements a little bit. Grenadiers are just your classic veteran elite infantry. The name comes from about a century earlier. They would be equipped with grenades. These grenades were, think like Looney Tunes style iron ball filled with gunpowder, which is great for throwing into an enemy formation. But in 18th century warfare, where you're standing shoulder to shoulder, if you light your grenades and suddenly one person is shot and falls to the ground, you have a lit explosive in the middle of a densely packed formation. You're gonna take fairly severe friendly fire casualties. So as the 18th century progressed, by the time we get to the 1770s, the British Army is no longer equipping its grenadiers with grenades. The light infantry, by contrast, develops out of the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War, where the British realized that European doctrines of warfare really struggled in broken and uneven terrain like you have in North America. The British Army had undertaken a bunch of reforms for that war, learning how to fight more like their Native American allies and opponents. And those reforms had ultimately brought them to victory in the 7 Years' War. Over the course of the 1760s, those reforms were walked back as the British military administration back in England said, nah, we want things to look fancy and European again. As the 1770s dawn, as unrest is more and more present in North America, it was very, very clear to the British Army that another war in North America was likely. And so, in 1771, they established the light companies. This would be one company from every regiment trained to fight like Native Americans. So very loose, open formations, using cover, hiding behind rocks and trees, while the rest of the British Army is fighting in these very, very close shoulder-to-shoulder formations. The light infantry is trained to form with about an arm's length between each file. Sergeant, if you could please put them at open order.
In zone, 3 paces to the right. The alarms face right. March. Take your 3 and say mark. And then immediately face front.
You have to sorry, we're extending?
Yeah.
Mark.
Right. Yep. As I said, we have some new recruits here. This is what is called extended order. This is another one of the marks of the light infantry. This is a 3-pace extension. So 3 paces between each soldier. I want you to imagine for a second, we have twice as many soldiers here. So every one of them that you see has a second soldier immediately behind them. That pair is called a file. The file is how the light infantry is trained to fight. One soldier from a file is loaded at any time, while the rest of the army is firing full company or battalion level volleys. The light infantry is firing independently. One soldier from a file will fire. His partner will take aim at the enemy and cover his partner while his partner loads. When his partner is loaded, the one who was covering will fire, and they'll alternate back and forth. Yeah, would you two demonstrate? When you fire volleys, you're limited by the speed of your slowest soldier. When you fire independently, every soldier can fire at their own pace. You have more time to aim your shots. It's easier to take cover because you're not limited by staying in that close formation. You can move about a musket's reach in case there is a rock, a tree, a wall, something you can hide behind. Basically doing all of the things you've always been told the British Army didn't do. The light infantry was trained to fight in that style. Between the light infantry and the grenadiers, they represented the veteran corps of the British Army, and the intention of the army going into the American Revolution was that most of the fighting would be done by the light infantry and the grenadiers. As the war progressed, the saying was, the battalion companies are simply nurseries for the flank companies. The lights and the grenadiers go off and do the fighting. They take the casualties. Those casualties are replaced by soldiers from the battalion companies, who are in turn replaced by recruits from Europe. This is a 3-pace extension. The light infantry was trained up to 10, 20, up to 50 pace extensions between files. So this one company of first 36, then about 56 soldiers can cover an absolutely enormous front. The light companies would often be detached from their parent regiments and brigaded with the other light companies from other regiments. So you might have 10 light companies, each of them able to do, let's say, a 10-pace extension covering an absolutely enormous front. They could cover the front of most of the army. Their job in that situation is to act as a screen, to find the enemy out in front, hold them back, and delay them while the grenadiers or the rest of the army maneuvers into place. The other thing that the light infantry is trained for is, or that is enabled by this formation, is the ability to move very quickly over uneven terrain. Again, when you're shoulder to shoulder, if you're marching and you come upon a tree, it's going to break up the entire formation trying to go around it. When you're spread out like this, you just step around and back into place. No one is pushed out of spot. So the light infantry is able to cover a lot of ground very quickly. Once battle begins, light infantry is often sent around the flanks. There are big, wide flanking maneuvers. This happened at Long Island, where the light infantry looped around. They were the ones who went through the Jamaica Pass. And the Battle of Brandywine, when the light infantry led the flanking maneuver around George Washington's army. The light infantry was also used for very rapid sort of shock attacks. They are selected for soldiers who are more agile, better stamina, those who are a little more independent, very well suited to very aggressive maneuvers. Could you close them to the left?
So, close ranks to the center. Trail arms. Close on the center. March.
You may have noticed that the soldier on the left of the line, your right, is dressed a little differently from everyone else. This is an evolution of uniforms as the war progressed. The majority of the company here is portraying the Light Company as it appeared during the Siege of Boston in 1775. Private Dibner, 3 paces to the forward, march. So, you can see we have wool stockings, wool breeches, a wool waistcoat, and a wool regimental coat, which is itself lined in wool. A leather helmet, which has 3 rings of metal chains around the top. This uniform is great if you're fighting in Europe, where it stays pretty consistently in the 60s to 70s year-round. Come to North America, where it's 70s and humid in early June, and it only gets hotter from there. This uniform is horrible. Wool is not as bad as you're probably thinking. It is a natural fabric. It breathes very nicely. The linen shirt that we're wearing under our coats wicks your sweat away, similar to modern athletic fabrics. The breeze cuts right through the wool, evaporates out the sweat, and keeps you not cold, but reasonably comfortable. But if you're going to be marching through the farm fields of Pennsylvania when it's 95 in the shade, this is literally going to kill you. So after the 1776 campaign season, the army is settling down in New York at the end of 76. They are suffering some supply shortages. They know their next campaign is going to be inland. In the mid-Atlantic, it's going to be to Philadelphia. So they shift to this. Private McLean, 3 steps to the forward, march. Oh, Corporal McLean. Sorry about that. Come on. Old habits. My apologies. He is a corporal. So, this uniform has some pretty significant modifications. The accoutrements are the same. The gear worn is approximately the same. However, the wool breeches are replaced by linen trousers. They have the same coverage. They are significantly lighter and significantly more comfortable and breathable. Instead of the waistcoat and regimental coat, this is essentially the waistcoat that the rest of us are wearing, with the sleeves of the regimentals removed and attached to the waistcoat. So it's a single jacket, 1 layer of wool over their linen shirt. The helmet is replaced by this felt round hat turned up on the left. This is essentially the cocked hat of the battalion companies, cut down. This hat provides better shade. It is lighter, it's more comfortable. The reason for the helmet, the main reason for the helmet, is defense against enemy cavalry. Those chains are so that when you and your one file partner are off alone in a field somewhere and a French dragoon charges up to you and tries to split your head with a saber, you might survive with a cut instead of a split skull. They get to North America, French cavalry is not a concern over here yet. We're not worried about Austrian hussars. So the need for the leather helmet is essentially gone. This hat is much, much better suited to the campaign conditions that they're actually finding. The other big difference, which you can't see on them, but is in the camp gear that they carry. If you see over there, we have a loaded knapsack and all the stuff that goes in it. That would be the full baggage of a British soldier. We're happy to answer questions about that when we're done. But that knapsack is pretty heavy. Once the army is going to be moving quickly in the mid-Atlantic and later, they switch to something called a blanket roll, which is essentially just you take an extra shirt, an extra pair of stockings, and an extra pair of shoes, roll it up in your blanket, throw it over your shoulder, and you're good to go. Much, much lighter. It's only the necessaries. You may fall back in. So, to wrap up a little, the British Army, highly, highly adaptive to the conditions that they find. They are making serious efforts before the revolution begins to prepare for a war in North America. Once the war does start, they are continuing to put effort in to update the army and keep it ready to face the challenges that they are actively facing. If we look after the revolution, if you remember back what I said at the start, that all those reforms from the 7 Years' War were walked back, it may be unsurprising to learn that as the 1780s progress, they walk back a lot of the reforms from the revolution. This short jacket that they introduced in mid-war, when they heard about that in England and when regiments began returning to England, they were immediately told, absolutely not, get back into your full regimentals. As the 1780s progresses, we move into the 1790s, the French Revolution kicks off, it becomes clear that another major war is on the horizon. The British begin updating their army for the Napoleonic Wars. They actually begin to adapt many of the changes, many of the lessons learned from the American Revolution to the army going into the Napoleonic Wars. They establish full regiments of light infantry as opposed to just the light companies, which they keep. They make the switch to trousers, they make the switch to shorter jackets, they make the switch to felt headgear for the whole army. So major lessons learned in the American Revolution that will carry the British military forward into the 19th century.
Quick question, is there a significance of the different shade of red?
Yes. Sergeant Dixon and Corporal Shine. 8 paces to the forward. March. Oh, I judged that well. So, you should see a gradient from left to right. This is a mark of rank. Basically, every step up you get in rank, you are expected to provide yourself with better and better clothing. So, the private soldiers and the corporals have the same uniform. The only difference is that corporals have this white epaulet on the right shoulder. Their clothing is provided by the government, provided by the army. It is sort of a madder red broadcloth, very, very hard-wearing fabric. They picked red just because it was the cheapest color available back during the English Civil War when they were making these decisions. The sergeants have the same broadcloth, but a much, much finer red. They're just supposed to look better. The sergeant, as a mark of rank, also has a red wool sash with a blue stripe down the middle. The sergeant has a silver breastplate on the bayonet belt, as opposed to the private soldiers and corporals' brass. They also have different lace around their buttonholes. Every regiment had a different lace pattern, and sergeants had just a plain white wool. Officers are a step up from the sergeants. My clothing would be personally provided. I'm expected to purchase everything I wear as a soldier, as an officer. So mine is a scarlet instead of the madder red or mock scarlet, super fine instead of broadcloth. So a much, much finer quality wool fabric. My lace, I only have a little bit of it, is silver instead of the wool that the rest of the army wears. I have a silver, it's called a gorget. This is a holdover from medieval armor. When we're done, I'm happy to show you it a little bit closer up. And a red silk sash. There are no individual rank distinctions from one grade of officer to the next. Every officer is simply providing their own uniform. The requirements are you must have a gorget, which you purchase yourself. There is huge variety among gorgets. The sash, which you purchase yourself. There's variety among sashes. Certain fine details of the uniform are dictated on a regiment by regiment basis. So the 4th Regiment is going to have a slightly different standard from, say, the 10th Regiment. But I, as a captain, you will not be able to look at me and tell my uniform apart from a lieutenant of the same regiment. You're not going to be able to look at him and tell his uniform apart from a major in the same regiment. You are simply expected to know all of the officers in your immediate chain of command. If you don't recognize an officer, 1, you should respect them because they're an officer and you're a commoner. And 2, they shouldn't be issuing you command or orders because they're not in your chain of command. They should be talking to your officer, not to you. And if you do know them, you know their rank. A list was published every year of every officer in the entire British Army and their rank. So if you absolutely had to check, you could. All right, you may return to ranks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, you're welcome.
Gorget?
Gorget. Gorget with a G.
Yeah. And
Sergeant, you may dismiss the company.